and welcome. You are listening to At Home with Ifeno. Here, we'll talk about helping women know and understand their worth, find fulfillment in who they are, and in what they do. Every other week, we'll talk about your identity as a woman, discovering your unique purpose, intentionally raising the next generation, and your influence in homemaking. I am your host, Ifoma Nneka Omoni. Hello. Welcome to another interesting time on At Home with Ifeno. Wow, time really flies fast. So what have you been up to? I say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever the time is you are connecting with us. Do you know that without you, we won't be here today? The fact that you listen to us, the fact that you connect with us, it's a lot of encouragement for us to keep doing what we do. So I welcome you all. Get your coffee, tea, get a relaxing chair, whatever it is, or you are busy at home, that woman taking care of those beautiful children, you are doing your laundry, you're at your shop, or even on your way to work. Please just give us some of your time. It promises to be worth the while. So today I have an interesting guest. You know, I always bring up wonderful guests who are very insightful, with a lot of experience and knowledge that will help us move to the next level of our lives. And I would like her to introduce herself, but I'd just like to say something a little about her, or I'll just give you her name. She's very, very special to me. On this journey of podcasting, that was how I got to know her. Her name is Tokunbo Ifaturoti. Please, let's give her a welcome from At Home with Ifeno. You are welcome. So we're so excited to have you, because I know we have been on this for a while, as in with your very busy schedule. We are really honored to have you today. How have you been, Tokes?
Oh, that was an awesome intro. And I love the linkages to our journey. I've been fine, thank you. As you said, it's just been so busy, but I had to make time out for my dear Ifoma. Thank you for having me on board today.
So what will you like our listeners to always remember when they hear your name? When they hear Tokes Ifaturoti, there's no other one like you, you know. You're very unique. So what will you like our listeners to remember about you? Who is Tokes Ifaturoti?
Well, that's a nice one. Well, I'd like people, maybe if I first of all go into the personality space, I'd like people to always think of me as somebody who is caring, who has empathy, and who just loves to want to make a difference. And so one of the key mantras that I always mention is like leaving a legacy. And I want that to be synonymous with everything that I do. So those are the key things when I'm looking at the personality kind of trait. In terms of who I am, I wear many hats. So qualified as a lawyer, practiced in that field for so long, and then moved into project management, which I'm in now at the moment. And I have always found time to give back. And so I set up a charity organization called the Children, Youth and Women Empowerment Initiative. I mean, we'll talk about that later, but it's all in the bid of trying to make sure that that legacy is being fulfilled. And throughout my journey, if there are any gaps that I have identified, I'm cognizant of the fact that I cannot fill those gaps alone. And so I have a team that I'm constantly working with, both remotely and in person. And all these factors come together and have just made me really who I am. So that's me in a nutshell. Yeah.
A lot of things to capture from Tokes. So you said something about, leaving a legacy, which would help me in bringing up our focus or topic for today. And our focus is are you a spectator or a stakeholder? Are you a spectator or a stakeholder? You know, in our life's journey, just like you shared, time really runs so fast. Whether we are ready or not, you just see that every day, every year, you are marking 1 year added to your days, you know, and many times, many of us feel afraid, you know, to put ourselves out. So what will you tell our listeners? Because I know this particular topic, are you a spectator or a participant or a stakeholder, is one that would be seen in different ways. So because our podcast is actually to reach out to women, you know, and many times people think that it's more of a man's world, or the males are more of those that, you know, are involved in life or in making that mark or in leaving a legacy. What will you say, or who will you say is a spectator or a stakeholder?
Well, that's a beautiful question. I think for me, when you look at stakeholders or spectators, sometimes it can be looked through the lenses of me, as I or an individual, you know. So you're looking at it in that way, and you're like, okay, if I'm looking at it through my own lenses, who do I think would want to hear me or listen to me? Who do I think would want to tap in to either the nuggets of knowledge that I have? And who do I think is just looking at me from afar, and it's like, well, it's all good for her, but that's just not down my street. And so I think the first thing to think about is, who are you? So if I'm drawing that question to me, I'd say I'm a stakeholder in different facets. So if I break it down into, you know, I talked about the legacy. For legacy, whilst I'm a lawyer, I'm a project manager and all that, but the legacy that I want to leave is in community development. It's in sustainable development. So automatically, even though I have stakeholders as a senior project manager, as a director, or whatever I find myself doing, I still know that I'm concentrating here in this path on the community development. So my stakeholders there would be the civil society. You know, it will be the government. Then if I'm homing it down again into my area that I've set up in terms of the Children, Youth and Women Empowerment Initiative, then I'll be talking about other NGOs. So I can talk about international NGOs like the UNICEF, or I can talk about community development organizations or local NGOs. You see, so all those will be my stakeholders, because I need to feed into them. I need to understand what it is that they are doing. I need to see how we can work together, what synergies are in place. So if we look at something called the Sustainable Development Goals, that is, set up by the United Nations too are part of it. But then a lot of conversations were going around with leaders, with market women, with men, with children and youth, to figure out exactly what is it that we can put in place now to ensure that we have a world that is better for us now and also for the future generation. So these are things that they came about to discuss and captured what they felt everybody felt could be put in place to ensure that we have a sustainable development mantra in place, not just only for the developed countries, but also for the developing countries. And so there was a need to look at environmental issues, societal issues, economic issues, and everything revolved around like people, the planners, and then if we look at companies, what are the profits, what's happening there? So for me, those would be my stakeholders at, different levels. And then if I'm looking at spectators, when I said some people can just be standing and looking at me from afar or from within my close network. So it's not that they don't want to participate, but there's a level, and sometimes there's a time and place when things happen. So they could just be looking at me and saying, I like what she's doing. I can learn a few things from her. But whilst my journey is still progressing, let me just stand back and see. And so those people does not necessarily mean they're not contributing, but what they're doing is that they're honing in on what they've seen that you are doing, adding that onto their own experience or expertise, which they're building on, which eventually will make them wholesome to be able to come out and become a stakeholder. So there are different things, different facets, different nuances. And sometimes, in honesty, you really do need these spectators, because if you picture this, if you go into a community and you run like a women's development project, so you want to teach them how to do, like one of the things we did was pastry making in Ikorodu. So we worked with young girls, I'll call them young girls, between the ages of 18 and, we use the United Nations youth, so up up to, I think, 35. That was the age group that we worked with. Now, initially, when we went into the community to do our assessment needs and find out if this was going to be beneficial, find out if that's what they wanted, and if yes, how could we work with them? A lot of people were spectating because they were like, these people have come, who are they? What can they bring in? Let's just see. And then when they knew more about what we wanted to do and how we wanted them to be part of this journey and how we wanted it to be a bottom-up approach, so we were not going in to say, this is what we want you to do. We were more like, what would you like to do? And we had a different variety of things, and then we honed in on the one that we felt out of all of them scored higher in terms of what they wanted and how they wanted quick returns. And so people that were initially spectators became key stakeholders, because they were like, yes, we can identify with this and we want to tap into this. So we want to have a stake in what it is that you're doing. And so it's wide, in communities you have like the ballet, the chief of the village. You just can't go in and say you want to do stuff. You have to speak to the right people, get them to buy into what it is that you're doing. And so once you've got that buy-in, some spectators become stakeholders, whilst others still remain as spectators. And also, I'd like you to know, Ifeoma, that your stakeholders can also be spectators.
Wow.
They can. So there's that crossover.
So from what you have been saying, it's like knowing where you stand or where you fit in. And the most important thing, wherever you are, is to remember that you are already leaving a legacy, whether you see it like that or not. As in, whatever position you are taking, whether you're a spectator or a stakeholder, you are already making a mark. But what you are trying to encourage our listeners, especially women, is that we need to get involved, no matter how little we might see, no matter how little we might see our contribution to be. There's a word that is very, very common in your vocabulary. In fact, this morning, I was just thinking, I said, should I call her the sustainability queen?
Yeah, like that.
Because she's always talking about sustainability. So that woman listening today, and she might be like, what is this big word again? Can you just break down what sustainability is and how it has also helped you in your journey as an individual?
Yeah, okay. So thanks for that question. So sustainability, if you say I should break it down, I'd always break it down with the UN mantra in mind. And so I think it was in 1987 or so, there was a commission, that provided a definition for sustainability so that it would be easy for us to digest and also unpack at the different levels where we found ourselves. So if you're working as an NGO, it would have a particular meaning to you. If you were from a company working, through like a company, it would have a particular meaning to you. If you were just a Joe blog like you and I on the streets, it would have a particular meaning. But that particular meaning, what they wanted is it should be the same throughout. It should just mean the same for all of us, but you could narrate it or you could apply it at the local levels within which it will make sense to whoever the stakeholders or the spectators that you're working with. And so what they've said is that you can define sustainability as meeting the needs of the present without compromising on the ability of the future generation to meet their own needs. So if you try to unpack that definition, you would say that if you're looking at it from meeting the needs of the present. So what are the needs of the present? So if we break this down into the women that we were talking about now, a lot of women would probably want to be in a position to be able to send their kids to maybe private schools because maybe the local schools are not fulfilling the needs of their children or the future that they see where they want their kids to be. So I want my child to be, I don't know, maybe to be a successful, fashion designer, or I want her to be an engineer or a lawyer or a doctor or, whatever it is that they have envisaged for their kids. You want to make sure that you can meet their needs. So as a mom, what would you be thinking about? So if you want to send them to a good school, automatically you'll be, where is the income coming from? Do I have enough resources to send my child to the school that I desire for them to go to so that they can fulfill their own potential? And so you begin to sit down and begin to think about different streams of income. What can I do? So if I'm a trader and I'm just, maybe I'm selling pure water at the moment, I can think, can I diversify? Is there anything else I can do? You see what I'm saying? So I have my pure water and then I'm thinking, you know what? Maybe I can go into pastry making as well. So I have the pastry making. Then, maybe I can start supplying my local community with small chops. So automatically building up a different layer or adding on layers to what you have existing at the moment in order to meet the needs of your children as they grow up. And then the next bit to unpack is without compromising on the ability for future generations to meet their own needs. So what that means is whatever you're doing now, try as much as possible to not think about only yourself, think about the future. So if, for instance, if we go back to our mommy or our auntie that's making all this, so she has the pure water, she goes into the small chop business, but for the small chops, she doesn't have enough money to be able to afford like a cooker, and so she uses the firewood to cook. Now, when you think about sustainability, you're like, okay, she's using firewood, so that means they've had to chop down trees. Oh God. They've had to chop down trees. Is that good or bad? Then she's using the fire and then there's smoke and all that's coming out. Oh God, is that all right? Because she's inhaling that. Do you see what I'm saying? Is there anything else that can be done to ensure that if she has to cut down like 3 trees in 6 months to do her business, is there any other way that she can do her business without harming the environment? Is what can be done. So you have other NGOs that will probably come, into that community and say, we have this kind of a system that you can use instead of using the firewood. We have this kind of stove that you can use, which is beneficial not only for the community, but for your health and also to protect the trees and the environment. So in that way, she's thinking of the future. She's not compromising because she's ensuring that she's not using practices that can harm the planet. You see, so these are
even
things
her health.
And her health. And then remember that the whole trajectory that we're talking about is to provide for her child or her kids or her nephews or nieces. So if she's doing all that, she's making sure that she can send her family members or friends or whoever she wants to empower to school or whatever track that they want to go to. And at the same time, like you said, her health is not being impaired. And also she's looking at the future so that they can also meet their needs. So when we talk about sustainability, those are the things that come to mind. And that's why about 140 or so countries, came together, or more than that, I think it's probably now 159, but they came together, to talk about and find ways to make sure that we can develop all these key aspects. So you remember I talked about the planet, I talked about economics, the economy, I talked about the people. Those are key things that we need to look into. And what is inspiring, again, is that when you talk about sustainability, it's not just you and I talking about sustainability. It's also companies too are talking about sustainability. A lot of companies are putting in practices in their businesses to make sure that they're managing their environment. There's less carbon footprint. You can calculate it, and you can. So you have companies that are like, if you don't need the lights to be on, simple things, just switch off the lights. It doesn't have to be on. Let's try
saving energy.
Yeah, but using practical things. So it's not as if you have to go out and pay to put these practical things in mind. It's just things that you can think about. And so for other companies, it's like, although the COVID has kind of made this a bit more popular now, but for other companies, it's like, see, if we can have our meeting done remotely, we don't really fly out to South Africa. We can just do this remotely.
Virtual.
Yeah. Or if before we used to send like 15 delegates out from Lagos State to Zamfara for a meeting, we just probably send just 2 people out and let them come back with a report. And when they get to the office, they have a meeting with all of us and just give us a brief of what has happened or do a presentation, and that will suffice. So it's things like that. It's like even little things that, you see the streets, especially because I'm very passionate about developing countries. So you see the streets, maybe a lot of us drink bottled water and the pure water in sachets. People dump them all over the place. Why not think about how can we pick these things up and recycle them? What else can we use them for? So it's thinking of these things. It's making sure we don't throw things into gutters that block up the gutters, and then when it rains, there's an overflow, and then the whole street is flooded, and then people lose businesses. It's that knock-on effect that sustainability allows us to take a step back and think close to what it is that we're doing, and what can we do differently to ensure that we meet the needs of the present. We want to live in a place whereby we can drive on our streets without having our cars flooded because the streets are flooded. What can we stop that? So it's having those thought processes in place, and not just the government, not just businesses, not just the big companies, but we as individuals. Ifeoma, what can you do in your community to make sure that you leave that legacy? And it's the same thing, Tokunbo, what can I do in my community to make sure that I leave that legacy?
Wow. She has hit it on the, she has hit the nail on the head. So many people might be saying, this is your topic today, Spectator or Stakeholder, sustainability, but she has broken it down so well. What are you doing in your home, in your community, your neighborhood, that will help the society? When you are disposing your refuse, how do you do it? Are you thinking about the people around you? How is your action going to help our environment? Is there going to be flooding because of the way you threw those bottles or corn cobs as you finished on the road, and then you start complaining, our government is not even doing what they're supposed to do? So she's just telling us that we are all involved. We are all stakeholders. Even if you feel it's not your business, you are still a stakeholder in all that is going on. Wow, thanks so much, Tokes, for these enlightening words. It has really made the word sustainable, because whenever you say sustainable, the SDGs, a lot of people just say, that's not my business, so it's for those big people, But you've made us know that we are all involved. Whatever we are doing is influencing the next generation. So I would like to give you a moment to talk about your works, talk about your NGO, and then maybe your social media handles. How can our listeners connect? And I know your podcast is still on, so this is the time to tell us more about what you do personally.
Oh, okay. So let's start off with the NGO. So I set up the NGO called Children, Youth and Women Empowerment Initiative just in the wake of the Boko Haram incidents in Nigeria. And the whole aim then at the time was, a lot of people were having to flee from northern Nigeria to other parts of Nigeria for safety. And what happened at the time was, if you looked at the group of people that were doing the fleeing at the time, it was mainly women and children, because the men had probably stayed behind to protect their homes, protect their farms, protect their animals and all that. And it became dire because where they were fleeing to, it was unexpected. So it wasn't as if we had, the huge like United Nations camps where refugees or people fleeing could have gone to, we didn't have that at the time. And so what had happened was that kind-natured Nigerians had probably offered some of them their uncompleted buildings, some of them land that they bought that they hadn't built anything on. They'd offered those to such people. And so what had happened was that when people fled and came down to other parts of the country, they were able to build what they call the bacha. So it's just like a wooden home kind of, where they could just sleep in, but they had to go out to use the bathroom and shower and all that. And it was almost a hopeless state because the women didn't know what to do, didn't know where the next source of income would be coming from. Food, they had to rely on, again, people to donate food to them. And what I want to emphasize is that some of them were doctors, some of them were nurses, some teachers and lawyers. So they found themselves in a place that they didn't envisage. And so what we did at the time was to, as much as we started off in Abuja, so as best as we could, try to provide few amenities here and there, restored a borehole so that they could have water in some particular communities, went out, trained women on how to make all sorts of things like soap, jewelry, even food. And so what they did was they began to use these things that they'd now learned how to do to sell them in the communities that they were living in. So that would make some money to buy the food that they needed for themselves and for their kids. So it was that kind of symbiotic relationship that we identified and also tapped into to ensure that at least life meant something to them. And moving on from that, we identified, because of the kids that came, there was just no education. There was just a halt in their education. And so we partnered with a foundation called the NSF, full acronym, Nigerian Schools Foundation, UK. We partnered with them and they helped us to send out a clarion call to get books, reading books. And so we got to Nigeria. And then from there, we began to fan out. So we moved out from just going to Abuja to the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria, to give out books, to run reading competitions, essay competitions, spelling bee competitions. So we traveled all over, Asaba, Maiduguri, Osun, Ogbomoso, Lagos. We just went all around Nigeria, really, just giving out books, having what we called, bringing back our reading culture. So we tried to imbibe that in everything that we did. And up until now, it's just been phenomenal in the sense that we've donated over 10,000 books to different people, set up reading clubs, which has been great. And in the process of doing that, we've also empowered young Nigerians who at the time had finished, some of them universities, somewhere in their final years, didn't know what to do, no jobs, but we gave them a platform to be able to work together with us on the communities. And at least over 90% of our volunteers have to find jobs or have used the experience working with ChiYoWo at their interview. This is what we're doing whilst we were waiting for a job. This is what we did. This is how we get to our communities. And very passionate. I always thank God that I have a team that are so passionate about giving back. Some of them with the little that they have, some of them with the most that they have, but that legacy, I can see it as well. So for me, I remember when I went to Unilab to give a talk, that University of Lagos to give a talk about, if you're in not a dry place, but you finished uni and there's nothing that you're doing, instead of doing nothing and just waiting for the blue-collar job, why don't you just come and just join us as a volunteer and begin to give back? And then, honestly, the fulfillment has been amazing. So we've gone from Ajegunle to Makoko. We've been everywhere. We've been on boats. We went to where the Boko Haram started here in Borno. We went to Maiduguri. We went to Yobe to give books. We went into deep communities where, the kids were, when are we going to see you again, kind of. So there's that thirst for education. There's that thirst for knowledge, but we all have to play our part. Like we said earlier on, we all have to play our part. We can't sit back and be part of the narrative that's like, oh, this is not working, that's not working. What are we doing? And so that's the whole ethos of ChiYoWo, which is Children, Youth and Women Empowerment. It's just repositioning the mindsets of others, repositioning towards sustainable livelihoods.
Wow. Very, 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 very worthy and informative description of what Tokes does. Thank you so much, Tokes, for being on our show. And thank you. I'll definitely put your social media handles, your podcast.
Yes.
She has this podcast, Let's Act. She's calling us, she's giving us a wake-up call that we all have to get involved. Even if you feel you're a spectator today, as you watch those that are taking strides, being stakeholders like Tokes has been doing, I'm sure some ideas have dropped in the hearts of our listeners today that there is something you can start from where you are, no matter how little you are. So you have that answer of answering whether you are a spectator or a stakeholder, and you can always move from one end to the other. Thank you so much for being on our show today. We look forward to having you more. But what would be one final word you would like to leave with our listeners before you leave today?
My final word, and before I say that, it's just, thank you, Ifemo, for having me on your podcast. It's just been amazing. And it's just so refreshing, to see how far you've gone with your podcasting, and the reach has been so wide and phenomenal. And the topics that you talk on, because sometimes women just do a lot and may sometimes feel forgotten, but you always find a way to just remind them of their values and remind them that no matter what it is that they're doing, they are adding value. And I think that is so important. So thank you for that. And in terms of the word, really, we said it before, just make sure you leave a legacy, a good legacy.
I don't have to add to that. Just make sure you leave a legacy. Thank you, and God bless you.
God bless you too. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Thanks for joining us this week on At Home with Ifeno. Check us out on Instagram at Ifeno17. As always, subscribe to the show to catch every new episode and leave us a review so we can continue to bring you fresh content. See you next in 2 weeks' time.